Welcome to the Dark Mind Podcast. Friends and familiars, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Dark Mind Podcast, where we explore the boundless realm of dark literature and film. On today's show, I have an author of military thrillers who takes you on a psychedelic journey into shadow and fear. He's joining me today to discuss the most recent novel in the Unholy Slaying Agency series entitled Door to Darkness. So without further ado, join me as we delve into the dark insight of Guy Quintero. All right, friends and familiars, we are live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and X with Guy Quintero, here to discuss his recent novel, Door to Darkness. Guy, welcome back to the show.
It's great to be here again. We had a wonderful conversation last time. You amazed me with your knowledge of the occult.
Well, I appreciate that. You as well, sir. Thank you for joining me on this second day of November 2024. I've been eagerly awaiting the third installment of the Unholy Slaying Agency series, especially after seeing the trailer. In Door to Darkness, you bring a fresh twist to classic fantasy, blending occult and religious history with the tactical action of a military thriller and the intensity of supernatural horror. So congratulations on the latest release, and thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. It's nice to be here again, and I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Well, so this book in the series centers on a mysterious phenomenon where children fall into unexplained comas at night when they go to sleep. There's no medical explanation, but the cases are steeped in supernatural activity, catching the attention of Madame Simone Dupree, the commander of the Scryers, a group of psychically gifted mediums who support special ops troops by monitoring supernatural threat in what's known as the ethereal layers. The special ops team, known as Butcher Team, handles ground operations, otherwise known as Topside, and is led by Team Commander Gabriel, and I hope I'm not going to butcher his last name. Is it Agapito?
That's correct, yes.
Awesome. Commander Gabriel Agapito, who derogatively refers to the Scryers as sorcerers and is very weary of them, or leery of them, I guess is a better word. Their first lead is a strange man seen nearby during the onset of these comas. He's wearing a headdress of black feathers with a black raven familiar close by. And that is where the story begins. So Commander Agapito, as I mentioned, has a complex backstory that explains his dislike for the Scryers. Could you tell us a little bit more about him and that background that causes him to kind of mistrust and have an aversion towards them?
Oh, yeah. Gabriel is a very difficult character to like. And I wrote him like that because when I was in the service, I met so many individuals who had different personalities and backgrounds and how they approach things. I didn't want Gabriel to seem like the heroes before, like Emmerich or any of the other ones. So I wanted him to feel different. And he's kind of approaches this like an anti-hero because of the trauma that he's been through. Gabriel is a protagonist, but he also symbolizes trauma and unresolved childhood trauma. And I think a lot of us can relate to that. We have a lot of issues that we carry and habits that we bring into adulthood. And he was betrayed by a family member who turned to sorcery. Someone he thought was close to him and loved him and cared about him and took him in. It was his aunt, and found out she was turning to the darker elements of witchcraft and sorcery and a darker purpose behind it, because all magic is at its core is just a tool. It's like a hammer. A hammer could be used to build a home, or it could be used to split someone's skull open. It all depends on what the intent behind the user is. And so, unfortunately, magic also receives a negative reputation because of the dark practitioners that utilize it against innocent people. And that seems to overshadow the good that's done with it. So that's kind of how it works for him. He's focused more on the bad things that happened to him when he was a young child, and he doesn't see the redeeming qualities of it. He's more concerned about the nefarious uses for it. And his main goal, despite how boorish he can be sometimes and pigheaded and stubborn, and how he lashes out at everyone around him, his main goal is to make sure that no other child suffers like he has. That is ultimately his main goal. So a lot of people, when they suffer trauma, they can compartmentalize it in different ways. And that's one of the things I've learned studying psychology and studying trauma and how it affects people, especially in my own life. And some people can take it and turn it into a negative. Gabriel, in his own way, turns it into a positive by trying to protect those he feels that cannot protect themselves from the trauma that he faced, and making sure that it stops with him, ultimately.
Yeah, his bad experience kind of caused him to have a shotgun blast response to the entire, I guess, theory and practice of magic.
Yeah, that's a good way to assess it. Yeah, it's just, he's an all or nothing kind of guy, and he's deeply committed to everything that he does. He doesn't do anything half-heartedly. As you can see, he once he goes in, he sticks with the plan, and he sees it to the end no matter what. And he has an indomitable will, something that most combat soldiers have. And he tries to take it and use it to accomplish his missions, no matter what the arduous tasks are that lie ahead of him.
Okay, well, my next question comes from me being in a state of, I guess, ignorance, because in A Whisper in the Dark, you had Ghost Team. In the Cannibal Peaks, you had Raptor Team. And now in Door to Darkness, you have Butcher Team. So I read the first one, A Whisper in the Dark, but I did not read the Cannibal Peaks. So how does Butcher Team differ from the others in tactics and personnel?
That's a really good question. All of the teams are trained to do basic combat operations, but each of them also has a special focus that they do for the agency. So for example, in A Whisper in the Dark, we see Ghost Team, and their primary mission was variable threat neutralization, small kill teams, and reconnaissance. That was their main operation. In the Cannibal Peaks, Raptor Team was the extreme climate warfare reconnaissance, and all of them are capable of doing the basic missions, which are just SAD, SAD, search and destroy, SAC, search and capture, SAR, SARS, search and rescue, DART, down aircraft recovery team missions, and SKTs, which are small kill teams. And all of them are trained to do that, but they take their focus more serious whenever you join a team. And what I learned in the service is that when you join a team, you learn that every team has their own atmosphere and culture. That's really what each book separates, is the atmosphere and culture that each team has. So Butcher Team, their specialty is neutralizing sorcerers and dark practitioners. They hunt down and track down sorcerers and dark practitioners, and they're very good at it. And each of them has a personal stake in it, because each of them has suffered to some degree at the hands of a dark sorcerer or dark practitioner or a dark occultist. So because of that, they seem a little overzealous than other groups in their pursuit of the unholy and the pursuit of specific vectors that they're assigned to take down. And that's what creates their atmosphere and their culture within their team. Why they seem so radically different from every other team. And also, I don't like for each story to sound the same. And being in a series, that can become easy to do with complacency. As an author, I want to make sure that each novel that my readers read is a different experience and a different adventure.
And so did I understand correctly that everybody in Butcher Team, you said, has suffered some sort of trauma at the hands of, whether they decide to call them sorcerers or just any sort of trauma?
Yes, they've all suffered at the hands of a dark magician.
Of a dark magician. Okay, interesting. Well, as the children fall into comas, the reader learns that they're actually under spiritual attack with their souls being taken. So, aside from the man in black with the feathered headdress and his familiar, the Black Raven, which I think is, if I remember correctly, is the first thing the children see, another figure seen during these attacks is a being in a large top hat with a card that says 10/6, I guess would be the way you would read that fraction, on the brim of it, known as the Hat Man. So can you tell us a bit about the infamous fictional figure your character is based on? And I was at the gym the other day, on Halloween, and everybody was dressed up. And I swear to you, the guy at the front desk was wearing the best quote unquote Hat Man costume I've ever seen, had the card on top and everything.
That is so awesome. Wow.
I wanted to take a picture, but I thought maybe he would think I was weird or something. I don't know.
Well, I definitely want to see it now. The interpretation of the Hat Man, I've been studying him for a very long time, even longer than when I conceived the ideals for this book. The Hat Man is a very nefarious specter who has popped up in urban lore for at least 200 years, from what I can tell. And he is a boogeyman. And one of the things about him is that he does not differentiate between whether he haunts children or adults. Adults have reported having dealt with him. I've listened in on numerous conversations and reports and stories about the encounters with him. Some range from being completely inconsequential, where he just merely appears in glimpses and then disappears. And then some are nightmarish sleep paralysis events where individuals feel themselves being drained. I've only seen a few accounts where there's been a fatality involved with him in regards to the individual not waking up from their sleep. And mostly that was by a secondhand account through family members that reported this individual saying they saw this individual, the Hat Man, attacking them and causing them grief and all that. And a lot of those individuals, sadly, were reluctant to come forward, because who's going to believe them that a hat-wearing shadow entity is coming into their room in the middle of the night and harassing them? It sounds outrageous, but there's so many reports now. And it's not just, it's around the world. They've seen them in China, too. So they've seen them in China and in Europe. They've seen them in Japan. So it's quite a phenomenon. It's a terrifying individual to deal with as well. I believe personally that this entity uses the arcane laws of interface, which allows him to permeate into individuals' rooms through their closets. And I believe that that is how he casts his net, and he looks for fear to feed upon these individuals. And when he casts this net and he terrorizes individuals, he looks for the weakest link, the one that he's capable of bringing down the quickest. When you're dealing with the unholy, it always comes down to frequencies and energy. And this is the reason why our ancestors knew to utilize certain remedies such as frankincense and myrrh, which was gifted to Jesus by the three wise men to help ward off negative entities. And also sound resonance, which was utilized by a lot of the monks. This is the reason why they cleansed their temples with bells, singing bowls, things like that, in order to ward off negative entities. So I think individuals who find themselves in a low negative vibration and a low frequency become the target of this malign being. And he then eventually makes his move on the weakest link. So it's fascinating how he operates. But I made the connection with the Mad Hatter because of how I believe, after looking at the accounts of Lewis Carroll and the way he spoke with Alice, I believe that this young woman was gifted in astral projection. So there's different accounts as to how Lewis Carroll was able to come up with the story for Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. One is that he came up with them, which I find it a little hard to believe, just by going off of how he thought and his other works. And I believe the other version, that Alice recounted these adventures that she saw while she was astral traveling and repeated it to him from a child's perspective. And this is the reason why he was able to codify and then publish it. This is just my personal theories, of course. Some people who are big Lewis Carroll fans will be like, that is blasphemy. And I apologize.
Well, yeah.
This is strictly my theory.
Well, yeah, that's one thing I was wondering. I was trying to look up, is there a common theory that he did not?
There's a secondary theory that it was Alice recounting her adventures when she woke up, and that she would tell him the things she saw. And I believe that that young girl was astral projecting, and she saw things on the other side.
Okay, see, I got to admit my ignorance on this one. I'm not really familiar with. So there was an actual Alice, a young girl that he, I guess, spent time with.
Yes, there was an actual Alice. There was an actual Alice. He spent time with her family, and he was actually the family's photographer. And he would take pictures of the girls and the family. And in those days, it wasn't odd to take pictures of children. It was a different atmosphere. Because it was considered something happy and wonderful, taking pictures of happy children in those days. So it was a little different than now. If you were to take pictures, a grown man taking pictures of children would be kind of seen as weird. It's very odd and something that needed to be investigated.
And was this the controversy right here? Turns out the real Alice in Wonderland was an 11-year-old girl who Lewis Carroll had a demented crush on, or is that just
That's
defamation?
Another theory. That's another theory, and I don't think that there is enough evidence to support that, in my opinion.
Uh-huh.
I don't buy that at all. Just judging by a few things that I read, I feel like he knew he had a hit on his hands. You know a good story when you hear one.
No, yeah.
I think when we talked to Alice, he knew he had a good hit on his hands, and that was the appeal mostly. I don't buy into that unsavory thing. Everyone always wants to assume the worst nowadays. I like to give people the benefit of the doubt.
Now, did she astral project just by being gifted psychically, or was she playing around in the cow pasture unattended and came across some cow pies with some mushrooms on them?
You have to wonder who came up with that idea to try this. Let's just eat this funky mushroom and see what it does.
Yeah.
I wouldn't cross my mind as utilizing
off of cow dung. Very appetizing.
My theory behind it is because after studying psychic phenomenon and the occult pretty much my entire life, I've learned that women are more gifted than men. Sadly, we were given the muscles, they were given the spirituality, and they were.
Well, that's why they create life.
Exactly. So they were gifted there in that respect, and I believe a lot of it went undiagnosed. And I want to blame a lot of the dogma of the church, and this is probably going to upset a lot of people because we tend to in the Christian community demonize the occult, and instead of trying to understand it. And that's a big problem because now we are unable to navigate these type of waters that we would see, like a gifted young woman who might be gifted in empathy. And she might not even realize that she's feeling someone else's feelings. They might, oh, you're just crazy. Well, what if she's an empath? And she doesn't know how to shut it off. She doesn't have the proper training to shut it off, the proper guidance to learn how to harness her abilities. And now she's suffering. She's feeling someone else's emotions. I knew an empath. And when she was growing up, she had told me that she felt like, when I interviewed her, she felt like she was suffering a heart attack. And she had no idea why. Her chest was hurting and she was paralyzed on her bed. And she said this happened to her for almost a whole hour of just complete suffering and misery and fear. And then it just suddenly ended. And a week later, she found out during that moment when she was suffering that faux heart attack, that it was actually her elderly neighbor who had passed away. And that's when she realized something was wrong. She was starting to pick up on people's feelings. She understood lecherous feelings of men that were around her, older men that were around her. And she understood when her mother was angry with her before she even showed up with the rolled up newspaper ready to go to work. So that started to tell me through my own research that we really need to start educating and arming ourselves to understand certain things before writing people off. And I think one of the problems with society is that we always have our mind concluded, and a concluded mind leads to delusion. I forgot who said that, but shout out to that guy who made that quote.
Yeah, there's something they always throw around in 12-step groups called contempt prior to investigation. And actually, while we're on the subject of empath, and I know I'm kind of leading us out into the weeds, I will reel it back into the story, I promise. But I consider myself, even though I can kind of be a bit of a cold-blooded shithead, I consider myself to have a lot of empathy, and I assume you do as well. What is the most intense form of empathy you feel? Because for me, it's going to sound funny. Have you ever been to a stand-up comedy show?
Yes, yes.
When a comedian bombs, I feel that so viscerally that I can't bear to watch it. Like I just like, cringe up. I try not to focus because I mean, that's the worst feeling in the world is to, just get up trying to make people laugh. And, at the very least, it's dead silence. The very worst, they're booing you, just saying that there's something wrong with you, Is there anything in particular you've ever witnessed that you felt so much empathy for? You just it doesn't have to necessarily be something negative like the stand-up comedy, but something that hits you so intensely?
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm cringing right now thinking about bombing on stage. That has to be stand-up comedy. I always told, and this is before I go back to the question, but stand-up comedy is one of the most toughest things you can do in this world. Writing comedy in general is very difficult. It is the hardest genre to write. So my hat's off to anyone who writes comedy. It takes a lot of intelligence to writing comedy. But to answer your question, I think everyone experiences empathy to some degree because of the law of one. And this is one of the arcane laws that I really feel that no one can escape. And it is, we are all interconnected. So to some degree, even those people who, oh no, I don't believe in it. When you look at your children or your pets and you feel love, that's empathy. When you feel fear for someone else, you see someone in a bad situation, that's empathy. Even if you don't want to say anything, if you don't want to say, hey, warning, hey, don't step out into that busy street, to some degree, there's always a form of empathy. Where it becomes a problem, though, is when someone is gifted, when their mind is open to other frequencies, and they're picking up on other individuals' frequencies. Because from what I've studied with the occult and the arcane, is that everyone is kind of like a radio with their own frequency. An empath is capable of picking up on other people's frequencies, and they hop to those frequencies involuntarily. And I believe this is the advent of the hindbrain. This has done something instinctively that they're not capable of controlling until the conscious becomes to terms with what they're doing, and they're able to condition that consciousness into controlling their actions. And I think that's one of the reasons why you see these greater situations where some people are suffering from a psychosis where they're feeling, oh, I'm feeling someone else's memories, thoughts, fears, etc. And I think that we should look into these alternative practices in order to find a remedy for them.
Gotcha. Well, circling back to the book, after some investigation, they discover that all the children who fell into comas had one thing in common. They played the same video game. And this is kind of depicted in the trailer for those that have seen it. The game has a screensaver, so it's a reason to keep the game open and running in a less resource-hungry form, and serves as an open door for evil spirits to enter. So what inspired you to combine supernatural elements with modern technology? And I know that's something you obviously do with military technology, but in this day and age with video games and all the other tech that's made its way into civilian life, were you making any sort of commentary regarding tech's ability to influence our minds?
Yes, actually. I studied subliminal messages for a long time in the early 2000s and the effect that it has on individuals. And I've interviewed and met so many pretty kooky characters who are teaching me about subliminals and the effect that it has. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to incorporate that into it. And also, the bad guys are always adapting. That's one of the things I learned when I was in the service, is that the bad guys are always trying to find new ways to impose their will on other individuals. So that's something that I wanted to incorporate into the opposition that the USA are facing. They're facing an ever-growing opposition. And in my opinion, this is the only way to keep them as a credible threat. Because sure, they're facing off against, feral werewolves who are running around in the wilderness. And that's not much of a threat. But now when they start facing more sophisticated vectors who are starting to learn how to incorporate technology within their nefarious wills and ways, now it raises the stakes for the reader. Now they're starting to see that there is more here than just a big baddie with claws. There's more here than just mindless violence. I wrote the first half of the book kind of like a law enforcement procedural with elements of mystery in it in order to build the suspense that would lead up into the extreme violence that would happen during the second half of the book. And I felt like the only way to keep the reader entertained is by making sure that I balance different aspects of the mystery and keeping them strung along, and by making it more complex. And that's the reason why I had to find a way to make the villains being able to keep up with the unholy slaying agency. I can't just have the agency becoming this technologically superior force that's always able to take down the opposition, because then there would be no credible threat there to challenge them, to create the stress response, to create the fear that I want the reader to feel for the agency when they're out there trying to fight evil.
Well, let me welcome our live viewer on Twitch. Thank you for stopping by. We are talking with Guy Quintero. So circling back to the book, the Butcher team is a special ops unit, obviously. And I assume not only have a history of traumatic experiences with black magicians, or dark magicians, I should say, they're likely made up from talent from all military branches. I'm thinking like the Delta Force. Aren't they like the cream of the crop of all the different branches of the military? Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That is correct.
Okay.
They are.
Okay.
They have an open invitation to anyone who thinks they can take on the DQ course, and it is very tough and arduous.
Yeah. Well, speaking of being very tough and arduous and having stringent entry requirements, what are the requirements for the elite team of Scryers who are using psychic ability rather than physical prowess?
Are you talking about Diver Team who's supporting Butcher during this operation?
Yeah, is it Diver Team that are the Scryers?
Yes. Diver Team is an experimental hybrid Scryer agent outfit. And the reason why is because it is so intense to become a Scryer and an agent. So to do both is an extremely difficult ordeal, and very few people will be capable of doing it. Being a Scryer is a lifelong. Obviously, they start Scryer training at the age of 16. And agents have to have prior military service on top of that. And the average recruitment age for an agent is around 28 to 32 years old. So these individuals will already have life experience, operational experience, but most importantly, they've been tested to make sure that they are not affected by the Shroud of Entropy. The Shroud of Entropy is a phenomenon that happens in 99% of the population, in which they see a supernatural event and they fall apart immensely. Their minds become addled and they become incapable of operating, functioning. Most people just faint and pass out. And then when they try to recall the events, it's usually done so in an incoherent manner. So if they see a werewolf, they'll be like, oh, it's just a giant bear, or maybe a tiger that escaped from the zoo. There's no way it's what I saw. And that is the main recruitment for anyone in the Unholy. That's the main recruitment requirement for anyone in the Unholy Slaying Agency. Are you one of the 1% that is not affected by the Shroud of Entropy? And the Shroud of Entropy is a human condition, but it's also exasperated by the shadow government by trying to tell us and conditioning our minds and telling us, and this goes back to subliminals, monsters don't exist, magic doesn't exist, all these things you see, it's just on television, and it's fun and neat during Halloween, but it doesn't exist. So when individuals who've been conditioned and they accept this and they see these horrific things for the first time and they faint or they pass out or they freeze and end up either becoming a victim or a bystander to what they're witnessing. This is one of the reasons why the agency just has these stringent rules to make sure that people are capable of functioning when they see an 8-foot-tall snarling werewolf ready to tear them limb from limb. And you hear it all the time in the service, some people freezing when the combat starts. And it's very true. Some people freeze. And I've never prided myself on being a tough guy, but the first time that I faced enemy aggression, I froze. It was one of the weirdest things that my mind was not ready to accept it. And then for about 5 seconds, in the longest 5 seconds of my life, I'm looking, I'm like, I was 24 years old. 24 years old when I first experienced it. And I remember looking at it thinking, is this really happening? Is this really happening? And it's, oh, this is really happening. And then you rock and roll. Those 5 seconds where I'm staring at it, it may have passed by in real time and the objective real time, real quick. 5 seconds is nothing. But for me, it felt like a lifetime. Like I'm Oh yeah, and it was terrifying. And I remember my heart racing. I remember my ears feeling like lava was pouring from them. I remember my eyes looking like or feeling like headlights. I probably just stood there just like this. So, and then I remember thinking that. So that's when I came up with the conclusion that not everyone's built for combat. Not everyone's built for combat. And when you hear these incidences where individuals freeze right away and they don't know how to react and respond, that's why, because it's not a natural response. I don't think that, I think human beings are naturally good creatures and we're not capable of naturally rising to violence unless we are coerced by it. And that's a whole other subject, but getting off topic here. But so it does the main requirements for an agent before they even consider the stringent testing and everything that especially a scryer has to go through. A scryer goes through, and I'm going to write a book from the scryer's perspective next. That's in the works. That's a plan in the works. There's a lot of people who love
that's going to be good. Yeah.
Thank you. A lot of people who love the occult, they're going to be interested in seeing what a scryer goes through to get to that level of training, get to that level of proficiency with the ethereal layers and understanding magic and how it's utilized to support military operations. And so after that, then they have to weed them out to make sure their will isn't broken. So that's the next thing. So there's seer school, and there's a lot of things that these individuals go through, and physically being an agent is tough. And I think everyone thinks they're tough until they go into combat and they're sucking wind. I remember my little brother when he wanted to box so bad, and we were to backyard boxing. And the first 30 seconds, he's swinging with everything he has. He's throwing all these haymakers and missing, of course, and completely out of breath and sucking wind. And then he realized he didn't like fighting anymore. Because after that, you're getting punched back, right? So he realized, I'm done with this. And I remember how just excited he was to be boxing and to put on the Everlast glove, cheap little $20 Everlast. And after that first match, done. Never talked about boxing ever again. So there's that aspect as well. You have to be able to train to run with about 50 to 60 pounds minimum of gear. You have to be able to train to, and not only do that, but to sprint with it, to crouch behind a vehicle with it, to make sure you have the leg strength and core strength, to crouch behind a vehicle with that, and then go through all of the different combat assault courses, being able to walk for prolonged periods of time if you're patrolling out into the deep wilderness. A perfect example would be Raptor Team, deep in the Jefferson Mountain Range. You have to be in incredible shape to carry all of your equipment with you. And they say, and in the service, they say you're carrying 40 pounds of gear. It's not 40 pounds. It's never 40 pounds. It's usually more like 60 to 80 pounds of gear. So you usually carry extra stuff. You carry extra magazines. You carry extra pyrotechnics. You carry extra food, and sometimes extra medical kits and things like that.
Oh, yeah, definitely not for me. I was going to tell a short anecdote, but I think it's actually pretty long. Long story short, I used to take Taekwondo when I was a teenager, but had to quit when I broke my knee. Later on in life, I think I was like 34 years old. A guy that I work with is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So we kind of went at it for, it seemed like forever, but I'm sure it was just a matter of minutes. And he kept slipping. He was smaller than me, and he kept slipping out of everything I did. And this other guy that I work with was like, hey, dude, this is an endurance challenge. Just letting you know. And man, I eventually got winded. Next thing I know, that guy wrapped around me like a spider and choked me out. My neck hurt like hell for like 3 months.
Oh, I bet. Those jiu-jitsu guys are amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I used to practice some grappling as well, and it is exhausting. I used to do a lot of wrestling and boxing, and it is exhausting. It's not something I want to do now that I'm an old man.
Yeah, me either. I'm made of glass.
Same here. I threw out my back just jumping up from my computer chair a little too fast the other week. So guy days are over.
And identify with that. Well, circling back to the book, a young girl named Phyllis is terrorized as her classmates and others witness her physical and emotional decline until she falls into a coma. Her best friend, Consuela, agrees to act as bait so that Butcher Team can ambush the man in the black feathered headdress. They find him outside her house, and of course, he's actively channeling energy through the ethereal layers. But when he refuses to stop, they beat the hell out of him. But somehow, Consuela still succumbs to the coma. So as it turns out, he's one of the good guys. He's what's referred to as a dream walker that was trying to protect not only Consuela, but the rest of the children involved. And interestingly enough, indigenous spirituality is not something I'm a stranger to because it is actually a prevalent belief system in the 12-step community. And, I can't tell you how many prayers beginning, during, and after specific meetings start off with Great Spirit instead of Dear Father or Dear God, right? So could you share more about the indigenous spirituality's general beliefs and philosophy?
Oh yeah, definitely. I love. I study more from the Navajo point of view. I watch Navajo traditional teachings on YouTube. I love that channel so much. It's just so wholesome, and I've come to the conclusion that it is a branch of Christianity. Now, the cultural differences may, at first glance, make an individual question such a statement, but they they believe firmly in the Great Spirit, the Great Father. They believe that he's called. Oh, forgive me, I'm probably butchering it. He's called New. I hopefully I didn't butcher that, but he's considered the Great Father, and they tell very similar stories to the Christian stories, where there's two sons that approach the Great Father, and they're looking for a way to defeat the monsters that are plaguing humanity, plaguing the Dene, which is the five fingered being, which is humanity. And so they're talking to this Great Father, and the Great Father gives them everything they need to overcome the monstrosities that exist on the planet and that are bothering the Dene and killing the Dene and preying upon the Dene. And they return back. So I looked at this and I started studying more. And then that's kind of a general summarization of it. It goes way more in depth, of course.
So is it like a polytheistic? I see the word gods like lowercase g, plural.
Well, they believe in a all-encompassing Father.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's smaller, like, holy deities, with the secondary one being a negative one. I forgot his name.
Oh, okay. So the Navajo god has precedent over all other gods, though he never figures as a creator, nor is he omnipotent.
That's not what I learned from traditional Navajo teachings.
Yeah, that's the internet. Who knows? You can't believe half the stuff.
But the individual who runs this YouTube channel is his name is Wallace Brown. Brilliant man, elderly man, and he is just so well spoken, and he's so charismatic in everything he talks about with the traditional Navajo teachings. And so I studied a lot of what he said, and I felt like it was closely aligned with Christianity in a way where he talked about the two sons, and I was thinking, okay, well, the Christian God has a son as well, so. What is it? What does he mean, two sons? And I was starting to think to myself, like maybe he's talking about the first and second coming, and because when it was explained that this world, that this great Father, this great Spirit lives in, is not affected by time in any way, shape, or form. He completely exists outside the rules that we have to live in. And so I was wondering, well, if his son approached him and asking for guidance and help, and he approached him within two incarnations, could this be the first coming and the second coming of Jesus? And it really made me start wondering, like making these connections there, as far as, and then you start to come to the conclusion, because I studied Hinduism and I studied Judaism, and you start to come to the conclusions that we're not really so different at first glance.
The perennial philosophy.
Yeah. We're not really so different, and I believe there's a saying that humanity is a species with amnesia. Because of the way we've been at each other's throats, we destroy a lot of information that would likely help us learn more about ourselves. And the one I think is the most prevalent was the destruction of the Library of Alexandria, which was done long after Alexander passed away, and the leftovers of his empire was conquered. And one of the things that happened was the destruction of the Library of Alexandria, which saw a tremendous loss of information. And so things like that happen in the conquest of North America, where now we see a lot of the indigenous tribes are wiped out, and sadly a lot of the information that they had was lost with that as well. So I came to the conclusion when I was designing this individual that I needed to study, just really study and hone in on traditional Navajo teachings, and then I at that point took liberties and created my own tribe which was supposedly in my storyline, supposedly lost to the conquest of North America. And now we have Corvus Geagi, who is the last remaining member of the Choctawi tribe. And he is the heir to the Dreamwalker legacy. And then that's the hero that you're talking about that they find. And I wanted to create that apprehension because I don't like stories that are cut and dry. I wanted to create some confusion because when you're doing an investigation from scratch, it is extremely hard to tell the good players from the bad ones. And my own operational experience has taught me that as well. So when we were on a mission in Iraq, and one time we apprehended an individual. We didn't rough him up nearly as bad as what happened to Corvus. So please don't assume.
I get you. Wink, wink. No.
So we didn't rough him up nearly as bad.
We just curb stomped him. What? No, I didn't say that.
We hogtied this individual with zip ties. And then after, questioning him, we found out he was one of the good guys. He was actually trying to keep an eye on the neighborhood. And he was one of the people phoning in information to us to let us know when the bad guys were actually doing things. So we made a mistake. And that happens sometimes in the operation community.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, getting the wrong guy, but then coming across the right guy, it takes a while for the agents to realize that Corvus is actually one of the good guys, so he ends up being imprisoned. But his cellmate is the notorious Edwale, the main antagonist of the first book. So did Edwale appear in the second book, The Cannibal Peaks? And what purpose does his cameo serve in this story?
Edwale, he's my favorite character, hands down. He's a pain in the arse, for lack of better terms, for the agency. He wasn't in book 2, but I'm pretty sure he would be cheering on the main antagonist of book 2 if he had the chance. But in book 3, he serves as I believe the term is deuteragonist. He makes the cameo because a lot of the problems that he's about to cause for the next novel, which he's not the main villain for the next novel. That would be Mindbender, Ethan Spears, and he is a very powerful dark empath and a very sociopathic, powerful dark empath. But the plot for the next book is Edwale, during transport to a maximum facility prison, is going to escape with some help, and he's going to free every other bad guy that's being transported with him, which is going to cause a lot of chaos, as you can imagine, because multiple teams have been working months on end to capture some of these nefarious, murderous, sociopathic, very nefarious vectors, very powerful vectors. So these are the ones that they managed to capture. Some of them can't be killed outright, such as Mother Mayhem. So now they have to try to find a way to round up all of these bad guys that have decided to flee into a neighboring city. And that's the role he plays in the next one. He is the catalyst. His little nefarious plans in the catalyst leads to the plot for the next one, which is going to require the agency to quietly apprehend these individuals without bringing massive alarm and hopefully minimizing civilian casualties. But of course, and this next one is going to be extremely violent because of the nature of what they're dealing with. Of course, the civilian population is going to run into them. And so, there's still a lot of bad guys in this next one. There's Ethan Spears. There's a dark empath. There is Chow Law, who is the traitor monk, and he is possessed by King Rama, an evil deity from Asian culture. And then there is Dizzy Izzy, who is a shapeshifter. And then there is Ida Burgess, aka Mother Mayhem, who is a greater werewolf. And there is a Dokelfair, which is a dark elf. And this is not a fantasy being that one would imagine. It's more of a very nefarious, negative elemental entity that permeates multiple frequencies at once, and a greater demon of cannibalism. Because I love cannibalism. I have to have cannibalism in there somewhere.
Something you want to tell us, Guy?
No.
I've never seen you eat anything. Well, that'd be weird if you did. You were just doing the podcast. Yeah, totally.
Is Turn this into a mukbang, huh?
Well, circling back to the book, Butcher Team's mission shifts to capturing and interrogating the creator of the video game that opened the gateway for the malevolent spirits to begin with. The game is manufactured at a place called the Carnival Ranch, where the CEO and creator work under the protection of a private security force. And private security forces are intriguing to me because unlike government agencies, they operate with a profit motive and often navigate into morally gray areas. And I think we're the same age. Do you remember Soldier of Fortune magazine?
Yes, you read it.
Yeah.
I used to read it from cover to cover.
Mm-hmm. So I think probably one of the most well-known examples of private security or private military would be Blackwater. I was just curious, do you know anyone? I'm starting to think I may have asked you this before, but I want to talk about it again. So do you know anyone who has worked for Blackwater, and were they any inspiration for the team that they come up against at the Carnival Ranch?
Well, I do know individuals who have worked for private contractors, not Blackwater in particular. My friends work for Triple Canopy and a few other groups. But no, they did not inspire the private security company. I had to come up with an opposition for the agency when they were coming in, and I wanted to use those possessed security guards, kind of like it's kind of underwhelming. I know it's not as, but those possessed security guards as a means to protect Meryl. Meryl was very important to the White Queen, so she had to be protected. Because if she was brought down, then it's pretty much led everything back to the main antagonist, who was trying to remain outside of the agency's radar. So before all of this had transpired, a lot of these sleep paralysis events that were happening were just that. They were just momentary flash in the pan events that take someone's energy and run, right? It wasn't anything intense where they were just taking the entire soul out of the body because they were looking for energy. Rather, they were just taking, a little taste here to sustain myself and then bounce. So something drastically changes amongst the denizens of Pandemonium, where now they have to take entire souls, and they're going after children, and which is the terrifying aspect of it. So being basically the face of Pandemonium in the material world, I needed her to be protected. So I don't have anything against private contractors at all. It's not for me. When I got out of the service, I just wanted to live a life of peace. I had turned to Christianity and decided that I wanted to avoid conflict. I have a lot of friends who do it, and they do good things. Some of them do humanitarian missions where they're just protecting food being delivered to people who need it. So it's not always black and white. I know the media tends to have a black and white view of everything. I don't think anyone is innocent in this world, to be honest with you. But there is... it's just this ugly fact, right? There's always a silver lining to things. So yeah, they're a necessary part of our military. And some people say, "Well, how could you consider them part of the military?" Well, most they're just former service members, and they're just now working in a different capacity.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of no one's innocent, the morally gray. In terms of moral ambiguity, the game's CEO and creator, Meryl, is evil, but yet she's also a victim. Do you feel Meryl's background and experiences make her more tragic or more sinister in the eyes of the other characters and perhaps the readers?
Meryl, I wanted her to be slightly tragic because I don't like writing, like I said, I don't like writing characters that are completely black and white. There usually is a motivation behind what someone does. And I've, even when I was apprehending HVTs in Iraq, they all had their reasons. And even if you didn't agree with the reasons, there was a logic that you could follow behind it. Well, we don't want Americans in our country telling us what to do. Understandable. If I was being occupied, I probably would be pretty upset about it too. I wouldn't want the United States to have a foreign army on our soil telling us what to do. So I can understand that. So when I wrote Meryl, I wanted her to be slightly tragic. I wanted people to be able to relate to the motivations. And that's very important. The reader has to be able to relate to the motivations of the villain. The villain can't just be mindlessly violent and evil for no reason. There has to be a motivation behind it in order to make it believable, and to turn that being that I'm writing about from just words on a paper into a thought form into the reader's mind, which inevitably becomes a person. That is very difficult, though, because most people don't like Meryl. Some people do. Some people would.
So more sinister.
Yeah, I guess it depends on your level of ambition, because Meryl's downfall was pride and ambition. Right? Pride is one of the deadliest sins, and it's because it can drive you to do a multitude of things that you would normally not do. That's what makes it the most dangerous one. See, all the other sins, they tend to have a more of A to B route, right? Pride can lead you to all of them. So pride can lead you to lust, gluttony, murder, all those horrible things out there. So that's what makes it so dangerous. And in a way, I wanted people to be able to empathize with her. Like, yeah, I have ambition. I wanted to do incredible things for myself, but I don't want to lose my legacy at the same time. So what do I do? Where do I go? Meryl, having more resources than the average person, being a multimillionaire, was able to reach out and was able to research and information and find the information she needed to reach out to more nefarious. I keep using that word. More nefarious individuals, more powerful.
Very descriptive.
Yeah, than herself.
Yeah. Well, Butcher Team must enter a land called Pandemonium to rescue the children. And I recall the violence. We've spoken about this earlier. I recall the violence in A Whisper in the Dark being fairly tame, but you had said when you were on the radio show that you had some readers that told you the Cannibal Peaks was too violent and dark with Raptor Team. So how does the violence in Door to Darkness compare to the rest of the series? And as you spoke of the next book, do you plan to keep it at this level? Or it sounded like you were talking about it was going to be pretty intense, even more so than it is in this book.
Well, being a pantser, I don't normally plan out the level of violence that's going to be reached. For this one, I would say there is some horrific scenes, because I was told that it was pretty bad towards the back end when they're in Pandemonium, dealing with the crazy denizens and seeing how they react and how they behave. And I wanted them to be unhinged, completely unhinged. You're no longer looking at Wonderland, aka Pandemonium, from the lens of a little girl, the innocent lens of a little girl. You're looking at it now from an adult who's able to rationalize what they're seeing. And what they're seeing are vicious creatures tearing each other and anyone else around them limb from limb, doing vile things to one another. So I would say that in this one, it's probably the same amount of violence as Whisper. So book 1 and 3 have the same level of violence. 2 and 4 are going to have the same level of violence. So the next novel is going to be extremely violent, and that's one's called Trails of Misery. So after this one is Trails of Misery, and it is going to be very violent. So I already have a scene where there is Ida, the greater werewolf, is going to be given drugs at a grave that she happened to wander into, and it goes south real fast.
Wait a minute. Are you talking about a werewolf on meth? Is that what you're talking about? Jesus.
So it goes south real fast, to say the least.
All you need is a werewolf coming at you.
So, got Ted Mouse playing in the background while you're being torn from
with one of those glow sticks. Pacifier in its mouth.
Oh, Vincent, what's wrong with us?
I don't know. As soon as the picture came in my head, it just got more elaborate. I couldn't stop adding to it.
So that's just to give you guys a taste of what's coming for book 4. Yeah, it's that one's going to be pretty violent. So for book 3, it's all loaded on the back end. One scene in particular that really affected the individuals was when they went to the hovel of homophones, which is where the Mad Hatter and the March Hare are. Because there's some of the worst of the beings in that area, and they capture. They don't like torturing children. They just hand the children off to the master. They like capturing adults that wander into their frequency. So they love torturing adults. So a lot of people said that they didn't like the Cannibal Peaks was overboard and went a little too crazy. So I'm going to have to be a little more careful with my warnings and disclaimers. That way I don't catch anyone by surprise again.
Gotcha. Well, we've already talked about the relationship pandemonium to Wonderland and Lewis Carroll a little bit, but just kind of as a brief aside, did you see and or hear about that movie that they were going to make about Lewis Carroll, where Marilyn Manson was going to direct and star? He was going to be Lewis Carroll, but there was such a backlash against the trailer that it got shelved for some reason. Did you ever hear about that?
No, I did not.
That would have been amazing.
I think so too. I think so too.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people try to relate Wonderland to children, but that sounds like it would definitely be something for adults. And with Marilyn Manson, the way he thinks, he could probably come up with something pretty nightmarish.
You see, I mean, let's see, Marilyn Manson, Lewis Carroll. Because I know there's still Phantasmagoria, The Visions of Lewis Carroll. Let me bring it up here. And I mean, I guess see what kind of images pop up. The Visions, Lewis Carroll. There he is as Lewis Carroll.
Oh, that looks good.
Yeah.
He does look like him.
Yeah. This would have been amazing. Marilyn Manson, Lewis Carroll movie. So they're talking about it like it exists. Did it get made? The film was to star. No. Okay, I'm missing the very top. No, Phantasmagoria, The Visions of Lewis Carroll was never made. God damn it.
Yeah, I got my hopes up. I was like, wow, hopefully it did. And I didn't hear about it.
All right, if anybody's listening, we need to get this made. Do like a Kickstarter or some sort of crowdfunding.
Most definitely.
Yeah. Well, there is a pivotal scene in the book involving ayahuasca, whose active hallucinogen DMT, also known as the spirit molecule, is used by Amazonian shaman. Hallucinogens like this have been explored as treatments for depression and PTSD in soldiers. So I know when you retired from the military, you didn't want to do anything that involved confrontation. You became a Christian. You wanted to just, live your life peacefully. Do you experience PTSD yourself? And if so, have you ever done any sort of, I'm not asking if you've bought illegal drugs and tripped out, but gone to the clinics and stuff that actually medically, under medical supervision, administer these types of things. Like I know ketamine is one. I'm pretty sure you can do DMT in a synthesized pharmaceutical grade in a clinical setting.
I heard something like that. I have not. I've never partaken in that. I haven't yet. I'm a pretty boring guy, and in that sense, I never experimented with drugs or anything like that.
Well, is it something you feel like you would need? Do you suffer from PTSD at all?
I do suffer from PTSD. I do, but I don't think it would be necessary for my situation. If the doc prescribed it, I wouldn't be hesitant to give it a shot. But for the most part, the PTSD is funny because it's different case by case. And mine is insomnia, social anxiety. My mind starts to play tricks on me when I'm in an area of more than one other person, and it's probably why I'm now a hermit.
Is that a fake background?
Yeah, it's Morehouse Asylum. I'm reporting live from Morehouse Asylum.
Okay, gotcha.
Yes.
Well, I remember. I think the first time that I interviewed you, there was something similar. Right?
The blood
the same
stained
background?
wall. Yeah, it was a different background. Yeah. Stained wall. Yeah.
How are you not keying at all? Like your shirt is not blurry at all.
Oh, that's an actual background.
Oh, okay. So you're not using a green screen or just doing some sort of.
it's set up in the background.
Gotcha. All right, gotcha.
Yeah, I don't like the
Sorry.
green screen because of the blurs and things like that. So,
Okay.
I feel like when you watch a movie and you can see CGI and it doesn't feel as real. Like for me,
Yeah.
horror movies that use CGI, they don't register at all. For me, my mind sees it, it knows it's not real. And so that's why I like to actually use the screen.
Listeners at home, I'm a little dense. You're all aware of this. Well, so, and why did I even go off on that tangent? You were talking about being a hermit.
Yeah. Oh, so we're talking about PTSD. It manifests differently for everyone. In mine, it's mostly social anxiety, insomnia, and I have severe memory issues. It's really weird. I have to write everything down, and if I don't write it down, chances are I will forget, and it'll be like it never happened. So those are my issues, and I could tend to be a little rigid when talking with civilians and people in person. So that's I'm a little much to deal with sometimes when I'm surrounded by a lot of people. So yeah, one-on-one, I'm great in one-on-one conversations. I'm great, but if there's another person there, my mind starts to play tricks on me.
Okay. Well, I think I'm going to skip the last question because I feel like it's impossible to answer without giving away a spoiler, and it would be the spoiler. So at the risk of inducing that, I'm going to quit while I'm ahead and say it was a great book. Listeners at home, buy it, read it, review it. And we had spoke earlier about you possibly reading a passage from the book. Are you still down for that?
I am.
Did you still want to read it over a music bed?
Yes, we can do that.
Okay. Well, I will start the music up and you start reading whenever you feel the urge to start, and I will adjust the volume accordingly so that you don't get drowned out by the it's just a nice little bed. You know what I mean?
Let me warn you against the nightmares that await this dive. You may suffer a fate worse than death and still remain alive. Oh, what I say here and what I say there may seem as I am simply rambling without an aim or a care. But you'll know my words ring true when your wide-eyed eyes see the pale furnace in all its electric glory, cooking screaming souls with glee. You should be going now.
Mic drop. Got it. Now, where was that in the book? I'm trying to remember.
That is the Cheshire Cat, and it is an excerpt he uses at the very beginning of the book.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. Well, let me see if I can throw one more good one in here. You know, I've mentioned it before. Have you ever researched the Temple of Set?
No, and I find it fascinating.
So you know what I'm talking about?
I heard about it, but I've never done any research on it.
So kind of the long and short of it is they're an initiatory organization that believes in Set, the Egyptian god. The Egyptians had gods that they referred to in plural form as Neteru, or Netters for singular. And one of them was Set. And if you read the records, like the high priest of the organization, I'm not sure what he was using for resources, but he lists all of them. I think Israel Regardi was a big resource. All of the other Netters, or Neteru, were spoken of to be against Set, and that was interpreted as he was somehow evil. But the way that he says the actual interpretation is that Set is the Prince of Darkness, not darkness as in evil, darkness as in self-aware consciousness. So the Neteru being against Set are awareness of self. The Neteru are aware of Set. I do a kind of a piss poor job of explaining it. So basically what they believe in is psychological and ritual practices meant to strengthen your consciousness to the point that once you strengthen it enough, you have control over it and you can maintain it after death.
That is fascinating.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
I heard of the Temple of Set. I had no idea what it entailed until now.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff that is available only to members, but there's a plethora, if I can use that that word, of stuff available to everybody. Like if you go to their website, which I think is, let's see, it is Kefir something. Let's see, kefir.org? Yeah. Let's see here. I met a guy that was a priest. So if you go up, it's Kefir, spelled XEPER.info. If you go up to resources, they have an entire reading list as well as essays hyperlinked. You know, start up here and kind of work your way down. It gets more and more complex. So, yeah, that's what's up.
Wow, you just added a lot of research for me to look into.
Yeah, dude, if you study this, I mean, what you could add to your fictional works would just be insane.
Oh yeah, that's a good resource. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
That's the wonderful thing about the cult world. It's never-ending learning.
Yeah. That leads me to a question, and I was afraid that this might come off as like judgmental or shitty in some way. This is purely a good faith question out of curiosity. It's just I am not one of the people that thinks this way, but I was raised around people that think this way. And it's like, you're a Christian, yet unlike most Christians, the ones that I'm talking about that I was raised by and raised with, you study the occult extensively, and you even own books like The Lesser Key of Solomon. Like the people that I grew up with, if they accidentally found that in their house from like a previous owner or something, they would burn the book and they would call people from the church to come over and like anoint I'm forgetting the word. And so why is it that you don't approach occult studies, especially the left-hand path variety, with the same level of apprehension?
That's a really good question. And it's a fair question too. And it's because Jesus told us to educate ourselves about the world, to not be ignorant. It is going to probably upset a lot of individuals, but most Christians don't read the Bible. They don't. And if they did, they would understand what Jesus meant by educate yourself about the world. If you become ignorant of the world, then you become susceptible to their plots. And so we are in a battle between good and evil, powers and principalities. Every Christian says it, but most of them don't live it. They don't live to those adherents. And if we keep ourselves ignorant, we will fall for the pitfalls of what is set out there by the forces of darkness. Because they have no limits. They don't limit themselves like we do. So by limiting ourselves in information and knowledge, because knowledge is power. Knowledge is power, and that saying is very true. The more we limit ourselves, the less power we have. And I know most Christians, I'll just turn to God. But when you don't understand the pitfalls, you could be pulled away from God. See, that's just one of the things the great serpent Lucifer wants us to, and that goes back to pride, thinking you know everything, thinking that you can shoot from the hip, so to speak, and try to take on the world without knowing how the world works. And one of the things that I started to question when I started reading the Bible was who are like certain individuals, because most ancient Christians did practice magic, and it's just going to sound completely heretical to most Christians now. But if you look at like the three wise men, they were magi. So they used astrology to navigate themselves to Jesus to find out where he was when he was born. They actually used astrology to find when he was born. And that astrology is still in the Bible today. It talks about the dragon chasing the woman in the sky. And then you find out Jesus was born on September 11th. and during the Feast of Trumpets. Something very controversial that most Christians have a hard time accepting, but astrology is right there in the Bible. So you also see that they give Jesus frankincense and myrrh, which is extremely powerful arcane reagents for warding off negative entities. And they just didn't give them like a little handful. They gave them massive barrels. They were riding on camels. They gave them, here, you need this. You're going to need gold to pay your way, but you're going to need frankincense and myrrh to ward off the negative entities that will likely be coming after the Son of God. So the Witch of Endor helped out Saul, the stubborn King Saul, and he was for a time the leader of the ancient Hebrews. And she told him, like, she reached out to the ancestors who told him, hey, you need to bend the knee to David because he's our future. And God has chosen David, so you need to submit to the will of God. And had the Witch of Endor not had done that, likely David would have been contending a lot more for the throne than he actually had done. I think that Saul lost his resolve when he heard that. I think he knew that he had to accept God's will, whether he was still stubborn or not. And then you have Simon the sorcerer in the Bible, who was empowered by demonic entities. So magic at its core and the occult at its core comes from God. Everything comes from God. And I think a lot of Christians forget that. If God made everything and God said the world was good, then you can't just write off things as black and white. It's all in how we decide to utilize the things that God has given us. So, like, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. Magic is like a hammer. You can use it to build a house, or you can use it to split someone's skull open, or cave someone's knee in, or cave their fingers in, or smash their toe. You can, again, a little trigger happy there.
You're freaking me out, dude. This is escalating very quickly.
But you can use it for a lot of things. So it's very difficult to try to ascertain a simple definition of magic. Aleister Crowley defines magic as the art and science of causing change and conforming to one's will. So it is not good or evil. It's all in how the person uses it. And I think that Christians, by not educating themselves on the arcane, are removing their birthright, because we were made in the image of God. Man and woman made in the image of God. That's one of the first things we're told in the Bible. God has absolute authority in this universe. So you have to ask yourself this. We are a young species. We have the ability. You have the ability. If you have the ritualistic know-how and the arcane preparatory methods of thinking already relayed in your mind, you have the capabilities of summoning an angel or a demon or an elemental. Pluck them out of existence and summon them right before you. Now, that might not be a good idea if you're not ready for that, because you could be subjugated by something that's thousands of years older than you and wiser. But you have the power to do that. So a lot of people, if you're a Christian, you must believe this, because we have seen it in our Bible. It's been spoken about in the Bible. So if you have the power to do that as a human being, because you were made in the image of God, you command this world, this universe. So if you have the ability to do that, you must learn how to protect yourself from the pitfalls that come with it, whether you do it intentionally or not. And a lot of the things that exist in this world exist to lead us into those pitfalls, to convince us that we are less than we actually are. We live in a society now where I feel a sadness in my heart, because a lot of people think of themselves as less than they actually are, manifesting a reality that is one of misery and one of wallowing in self-pity. And we have to pick ourselves up by our bootstraps and aspire for more. Edgar Cayce said, like things attract. So if you think positive, you will attract positive things. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier. The birthright that we were given. You were made in the image of God. You can manifest your own reality. And this is what a lot of the celebrities talk about. They talk about, it's called manifesting. But there's more to it than that. They sell it short, and they try to make it seem like it's easy, because everyone's looking for a simple pill you can take, swallow, and be done, and instant results. There's no such thing as instant results in this world. Everything happens slowly. So everything is a matter of energy exchanges and resonance. And you have to exchange those energies and expend that energy in order to get where you're trying to go. So that is, this is a lot to think about. I just dropped some knowledge from the Kabbalion right there, but that's a really complex question. I could keep going, but I think we have a limited amount of time. And And I could teach a whole college course on that, on that subject itself. It's very complex.
Yeah.
Hopefully, what I said didn't just sound like rambling.
No. And you do well explaining quite a few things specific to your book, but, those sorts of ideas in general on your YouTube page, I had no idea. I just stumbled across that because I was looking for links to put in the description for the show. I was like, he's got a fucking YouTube page. What's on here? So, yeah, very well done videos. Very interesting.
Thank you. I talk a lot about the inner workings of the world that I've created, the Unholy Slaying Agency. So I took a break for about 2 weeks because of my book release, but I'm going to get back to that so that my readers can learn more about the characters and the monsters that they love.
Sounds good. Well, Guy, as always, it has been a pleasure talking with you.
Likewise, Vincent, you're the best. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, sir. Well, so as we bring the show to a close, is there anything you'd like to plug or let your readers know about?
Book 3 for the Unholy Slaying Agency is out now. It is live. We have reached number 2 on the military horror fiction list. Thank you so much to all my readers who came out to support. It reached number 2 on Ingram Sparks. So that's worldwide. That's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. That's a huge list to make. So this is my first time breaking top 10. And I'm so excited. So I want to thank the Bookstagram community for always coming out and showing me love and support. I have so many readers. I apologize if I've fallen behind on getting back to my DMs. I know a lot of people ask questions, and I got hundreds of readers I'm talking to at any given time. Thank you for your patience. I will get back to that as well. I've just been really busy with the book launch, but thank you so much for the success. People like Vincent helped me out and helped me get the word out about the Unholy Slaying Agency. Thank you all, because this victory could not have been achieved without all of you. So thank you.
Hell yeah. All right. Well, Guy, do stick around after we disconnect from the stream just so I can give you some quick information. But listeners at home, both live and on demand, all links are in the description. And Guy, thank you again for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you to everyone who tuned in. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you can watch the episodes live. Be sure to tune in every Tuesday for a new episode featuring the best and brightest writers and filmmakers of dark literature and film. So until then, stay healthy, stay sane, and as always, thank you for listening. See you next time.